Hey there, this is Sam from Assembled's community team, and I'm joined here today by the incredible Mercer Smith of Partner Hero fame. And we're actually here live and in person from Austin today because we just both happened to be chilling in Mercer's hometown and thought, of course, we had to meet up face to face. So hello, Mercer.
Hello. So happy you're here.
Yeah, I feel like we've been kind of like circling each other digitally for like a year and a half now. And then we like finally like bump into each other in real life. It's always a great moment, like post-COVID, when you see like your like internet homie for the first time.
Yes. I'm so glad we worked out.
Yeah, totally. A universal post-COVID experience, perhaps. But anyway, well, so cool. I'm really glad we had the chance to connect today already. And of course, today we're going to be chatting about all things outsourcing. So as we both know, this tends to be, I would say rightfully so, a pretty hot button topic in CX world. I can't tell you how many folks I've heard kind of think of BPO as a bit of a four-letter word, especially when it comes to things like the classic, they're coming to take our jobs, that ever-present narrative. And I think that you guys over at Partner Hero have a lot of interesting thoughts around this area. So I was just hoping to sync up with you and just chat a little bit about the ground source truth here.
Yeah, I think, BPOs historically have just come in as trying to be like the lowest cost option. Come to us if you're trying to save money. And I think we're seeing a nascence of a new type of BPO, right? Like we're seeing a lot of for good messaging. We're seeing a lot of BPOs that are focused on specific sectors. And Partner Hero, we've been around for 9 years now, kind of paved the way with that. And I think given how important human experience is to us, it's important that the people both inside of Partner Hero and the partners that we're working with get to have that good human experience. And I think like one of the ways that BPOs can do this, and I'd love to hear your take on, being outside of that world, can be helping to figure out ways to empower the internal teams. So rather than replacing all of your like frontline support and like letting go your internal teams, figuring out ways to empower them, right? And figure out like career progression and internal like mental health best practices, things like that, is something that we do at Partner Hero. And I also really hope that we see becoming more present in the BPO space.
Right. You bring up an interesting point because something I've seen again and again, like I think that there's actually kind of two narratives on the ground that I would say like can be true. Not saying these are universal experiences, but I think that there's kind of this outsourcing motion where either all at once, but usually over time, the BPO will kind of become that like there is no internal team, like it's all BPO now for better or worse. And I think that's really the model most people have in mind when they think about outsourcing is like you have this really wonderful team of internal agents today and then tomorrow, who knows? But in reality, there's actually a ton of different shades of gray. And in my experience, this bucket tends to be a very small bucket. And it also usually tends to be, in my personal opinion, people that are maybe not actually seeing the full scope of benefit from outsourcing and are more maybe using that kind of race to the bottom cost model. But then on the other side, what I see really frequently, and this sounds like it's true on what you observe as well, is a lot of the time introducing a BPO becomes kind of your first step towards levers and ladders for career progression on a CX team, where a lot of the time if you don't have some kind of stratification in place, like you could spend all day just doing your most common kinds of tickets, and that's not really always the best way for folks to potentially leverage their career.
And I think it also depends on the type of company that is outsourcing, right? So like for instance, if you're a business that cares about CX and is like constantly trying to figure out how to provide a better customer experience, you're going to find those opportunities to leverage your BPO probably more readily than a company who's just kind of like, whatever, slash prices, let's just try to focus on the bottom line.
Right. And we know those companies are out there. They do exist, but we can all probably think of a few in our head, actually. No name dropping on the pod, but Yeah, but to your point, like there's definitely brands out there that are doing this right.
Yes. Yes. And also like, I think it depends on your stage, right? Like if you're just coming into this and you're just building a product, you might not necessarily know what mature customer experience looks like. You might not know that like, oh, actually there's like ticket deflection, or, oh, actually there's like knowledge bases. Like these are all things that you might not know about.
Right.
And so partnering with a BPO that really does have excellence in that space can be helpful for companies that are not looking to like just entirely get rid of their teams and provide some development inside, right?
Totally. You bring up a really interesting point with these nascent teams. Something I'm kind of curious about is, do you ever see teams that are kind of on that like ground floor of CX where they're just kind of building this out for the first time, where maybe they kind of use a BPO as a bit of the scaffolding to kind of build out that internal muscle?
Yes. And I think we'll also see a lot of teams in that state who are very curious, and they're like, well, what are other people doing? What do other like folks that are using Partner Hero in this case, but I'm sure other BPOs have this as well. What are they doing? Like, what are they experiencing excellence with? Or what are the steps that they've taken? So that kind of like community thought piece can be really powerful in this space as well.
Absolutely. Something that I'm kind of curious about is, what do you think, like, excuse the buzzword, but what do you think CXcellence leveraging a BPO looks like in your mind? Like, give me like a kind of a quick case study. It can be an imaginary one, but of like how this like can be a really positive thing.
Yeah, I do have a case study. I just recently spoke with Gwen at Meetup, who's been using us for like 4 years, right?
Oh, awesome. Love Meetup, by the way. Like,
yes.
They are such a bop in San Francisco. Thank you, Meetup.
Yes, Meetup is amazing. And their like founding story is amazing. All of it's great. I love Meetup so much, and they're one of our great partners. So when they started using us, it was 4 years ago, and it was like their support team was underwater, right? They had like, there were total backlogs. It was a mess, and they were changing the interface of their product. And they were like, we know that more people are going to be reaching out. What do we do? And so long story short, what they did is they brought in Partner Hero. And then instead of like totally replacing the frontline team or, any of that at all, they were like, okay, how do we do this intentionally and use the internal team, so the people who were actually at Meetup and had been at Meetup, to further these like CX best practices. So how do we use them to like figure out our triage pathing, and how do we use them to like write our documentation? How do we give them career opportunities to like focus on the things that they really care about and that really light them up?
Right.
And that's what they ended up doing, right? Like they used PartnerHero's outsourced team as a method to like handle that frontline stuff. Some of the Partner Hero team at this point, now 4 years down the journey, are at like team lead or operations manager level as well. So they're also experiencing career growth. This is not just like bring in people and let them handle your frontline and not give them any development either, right? Like definitely not that. But Meetup like put practices in place to give the internal team that they had ability to grow. And a lot of that team is actually still there in terms of like, they're in like CX management now. So people who started on the front line at Meetup's internal team were given opportunities to focus on these things that mature the CX, create better CX opportunities for their customers, and hence have developed in their own like management life cycle.
That's so interesting that it's kind of a sword that cuts both ways. Well, actually, that's a poor metaphor for this. What I mean to say, because this is a positive thing, what I mean to say is that it's a positive lever potentially for both internal teams and that external team that's getting that like career experience from the outsourcing as well. So it's kind of like a double dip on the positive benefit.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's the opportunity for it to be that. I think we're talking about, how it can benefit internal teams and how like folks can have their time freed up to focus on more impactful or more interesting stuff in that frontline support, but also on the BPO side, right? Like if you're working with a BPO that has good retention, like if their associates stay, and
which hopefully they do.
and oftentimes they do, if it's, you know, if they're happy and taken care of. I think that's something that you should check for with a good BPO. If you're looking for BPOs, look at their retention of their associates. That's like the first thing you should look at.
Interview a current employee anonymously.
Yes. Talk to associates, like find people on LinkedIn and like see how they're treated. Cause that's super important.
By the way, I was really into the piece you guys posted on your LinkedIn page recently. Oh, I wish I remembered her name, but it was, I believe, someone that mentioned that they were legally blind. Yeah. I thought that was such a cool story, and also so like showing of like the career progression that is possible for folks that do hang out with the same partner for a while.
Yes. And even better is like, even if they're not with the same partner, we like, so say we have a partner that is, you know, no longer working with Partner Hero or something like that, we will always move associates to another program that's similar. So instead of just being like, oh yeah, sorry, we don't have a job for you anymore, we maintain them and coach them, and often find other opportunities. Most of the people on our like internal leadership actually started as associates at Partner Hero.
Oh, really? That's super interesting.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect that. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I know perhaps like the pendulum is tilting too much in our discussion direction for like the ways that this is really great for internal employees at BPOs, but I do think it's also, even from the outside looking in, for a lot of folks that think with their heart, which is a lot of people in CX, like actually a big concern I've had in like my prior lives for like, if we want to bring on a BPO or not, is actually thinking about like, oh yeah, but what about, am I just shifting all the worst things about my job to somebody else who's going to be in a bad situation? But it sounds like actually that's kind of also a bit of a mirage.
I think so. I mean, so full transparency, Partner Hero was my first BPO, right? I had similar opinions about BPOs prior to starting at Partner Hero. In fact, I was very worried that I was going to like get in and be like, oh no, everything that I like assumed was good is not good. Because I thought, you know, Partner Hero is kind of changing the game. And yeah, I mean, I think there's huge opportunities. Like, it's really amazing to see some of the folks that are associates, how long they've been with our company. And I assume other BPOs have this as well. And then also like the opportunities for growth, like Mandy, who I think, you know, she started as an associate.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, you go, Mandy.
Yes. And, you know, Alana and all of these people on our team, like started as associates.
Started as an associate.
Yeah, on our operations team. So
yeah, I would have had no idea. That's so awesome.
Yeah. And so there's lots of areas for growth. And I think, you know, you're like, if you are a heart-driven company, that's going to be the case. Right.
Right.
So I think, you know, obviously there are BPOs that aren't, but like, if you are doing your decision making and trying to find a BPO to work with, you can talk to people and kind of get that sense, I think.
You know, I think there's also kind of an interesting meta point in there that we've kind of made a few times without explicitly saying it, which is that like a company finding the right BPO is like kind of a matchmaking process. Like they're not like it would be painting with way too broad of a brush to say that like all of the companies out there are the well, you know, maybe I will name drop are like the Comcasts and like that's the only one I can really think of off the top of my head that feels name droppable.
Spirit Airlines.
Oh yeah, Comcast, Spirit Airlines. There, you could think about this for but there are folks that are in that race to the bottom, and they probably are also going to gravitate towards like CX solutions of all stripe, really, but especially BPOs that enable that race to the bottom from a cost-cutting perspective. Yes. But not all companies are going to be the megacorp, megacorp cost-cutting, whatever, and the ones that are probably aren't matching with a company like Partner Hero.
Right. Yes, 100%. I think, you know, at the risk of veering off too far, there's a game called Stardew Valley. And in that game,
I love Stardew Valley, but
yes, I do too. There are two options, right? You can go about it by like doing the hard work and figuring out what the pathing looks like and, you know, building the community center. Hope I'm not spoiling. I'm not spoiling anything. I don't think I'm
out for like
okay. All right.
10 years now. So I think we're okay.
It's been 10 years. Anyway, you can build out the community center and work alongside, you know, all of the little alien creatures and like find all the
local
stuff.
cast of characters.
Yes. Or you can just like pay money to Joja Corp and like
make your problems go away.
Make your problems go away. And I think like that really is emblematic of what you do with BPOs, right? Like, I think you get in what you put in, right? And so if you're working with a BPO partner and you're like going in with the mindset of like, we really want to make this a good experience for our internal folks, we really want to make this a good experience for the associates, and you're willing to put in the effort and like go fishing in the rain in spring, to continue the Stardew Valley metaphor, then you're going to get that out, right? Like you're going to have a really thriving, beautiful experience. Whereas if you're just like, I'm just going to put my money in to try to get it done the fastest way as possible, you're not going to have that same experience coming out.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, it sounds like it's really all about kind of values alignment from the get-go, just like any responsible decision you would make for your business. It's just all about like, does this line up with where my priorities are? And I think for a lot of people in CX, it is that bottom line, of course, but it is also like leading with heart and like, especially in CX.
Yes.
Like we tend to be a very like warm, soft, fuzzy bunch, not to paint with too broad of a brush. Actually, perhaps that is painting with too broad of a brush. I have definitely met some.
I have too.
Don't be wrong. There's some battle axes out there in CX. There's not many.
Yes.
But like for a lot of us, we like to like really think from the heart for like where our business decisions are coming from. And I think that does make a lot of sense with kind of the general like shape of trends we're seeing in outsourcing as well.
Yep, for sure.
Cool. Well, switching gears here a bit, because I feel like we've kind of jumped down the rabbit hole for what that like external motion looks like. I think like the other side of this is going back, of course, to the internal employee experience. And as we talked about, I think that it's kind of self-evident that a BPO motion for a lot of small teams especially is kind of that first entry point to stratification. Like I've talked to so many teams that the very typical structure I see when I'm coaching people through things like forecasting, because at Assembled, we have to think about forecasting for different kinds of volume. Because as an example, I mean, this is probably way too in the esoteric weeds, so I'll try to keep it a very simple one. But let's say that a ticket comes in that's a Spanish ticket. You don't just need to know that ticket is coming in. You need to know that that's a Spanish ticket that's coming in. So that way, you know, you have the right amount of Spanish speakers on your team to handle that kind of volume. And actually, I suppose foreign language would be another great use case for BPOs, but a lot of the time, the real structure I see is usually it'll be some kind of like, for issues A, B, and C, these are tier 1 requests, which are things that go to that like frontline person, very often an outsourced agent. And then from there, everything that hits your internal team, which will typically be kind of a smaller team of specialists. Like your Ocean's 11 style team, that'll handle more like escalations and like really specialized tickets. And of course, that opens up all kinds of career mobility for that internal team to then take on those like management roles or more specialist roles.
The differentiation, right? And so something that I coach a lot of the partners that we work with who are trying to figure out what that looks like, right? Like how do I develop that for my internal team is something that I call, I'm pretty sure I've said this to you before, but the likes and loathes. Have I mentioned this before to you?
I think in passing, but do regale me again.
So likes and loathes, I say like, okay, have your team members for 2 weeks, go about their day to day and write down all the things that they like and all of the things that they loathe. And after those 2 weeks, review that with them, figure out like, okay, so you really don't love responding to these repetitive tickets. You really do love writing new documentation and educating fellow team members. Okay.
And I bet no one ever writes out like, I just love processing returns or something like that.
I mean, there actually are some people that do, right? Because it feels really quick. You get those dopamine hits, right? But you know, whatever it is, you end up reviewing that with your internal team and you can figure out more custom pathing as you're going. So you can figure out like, okay, this person really loves this, doesn't really love this. How can we figure out a way to give them more time to do that? How can we figure out a time or more availability of their time and resources to focus on that? The way is by moving some of the stuff that's on their plate to your BPO, by continuing to elevate the responsibilities of the people that you're outsourcing to, so that you can elevate your internal team.
So I know we've already kind of touched on the likes and loathes and like building a bit of a strategy for like how you can kind of think about routing work on the team. But I assume being on the ground floor with a lot of folks that are maybe entering their outsourcing journey for the first time, I imagine like, so I hear like the bubblings up of anxieties a lot of the time kind of from the sidelines, like, oh, Sam, like we're thinking about getting started at the BPO. My agents are anxious about it. But I don't think that story quite hits me in the same way I imagine it does you, because you're kind of on the front line of that change. And I'm really curious to hear, like, how do you talk with your customers about talking about outsourcing? Like, how do you coach them through coaching their agents through that anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really about hearing that anxiety. Like, what is the flavor of that anxiety, I guess? Because there's a few different ones that could be coming up. It could be like, oh, there's not going to be enough work and I'm going to be laid off. Or like, oh, it's going to totally change the culture of the team. Or like any number of anxieties. Those are the main two that we hear. And I think it's hearing that and speaking to it right off the bat, right? Like if it's like, if they're beating around the bush and they're like, oh, I'm afraid that I'm going to get laid off or I'm not going to have a job, reassuring them, unless of course you're planning on doing something like that, in which case, like, don't reassure your team if you're actually going to do layoffs. Like, just be straight, try to be as honest as you can, I guess.
Sorry. Down a bit.
I mean, like you wouldn't want to be like, oh, nothing's gonna happen, and then like 2 weeks later,
go ahead and put that down payment down on that mortgage, Sam. Like, don't do that.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yes, exactly.
But most of the time, to be clear, that's not the case. I'm just being a little silly, but
100%. But I think, like, that's what I would say is like, learn what the flavor of their anxiety is and talk to them about that, right? Like, okay, if they're afraid that the jobs are going to their jobs are going to go away, then like give them access to what you're planning on doing with the BPO. Like, oh, okay, the BPO is just going to be handling like 1, 2, and 3, these issues, which means that you will be able to focus on X, Y, Z, these things that you said that you care about, right? Like, right. I think that any story can be told to reassure, right? You just need to figure out what it is that they need to be reassured of. And use that in the storytelling. Same thing goes with culture. If they're like, oh man, our culture on our team is going to totally change. Like, okay, how are we going to integrate the BPO into our culture so that it enhances rather than detracts? Right? Like, you can bring the team members into your meetings. You can bring the team members into your Slack. You can do all of it. You can have them at your offsites if you want to. We have partners that fly associates to their offsites.
Really? Wow, that's really cool. I didn't know, actually. So for full disclosure, I've previously worked with BPOs, not Partner Hero, at different companies that I've worked at, and I've never actually seen any kind of, at least from the internal perspective of like that cultural integration. Like at most places I've worked at, it's kind of more like the BPO works behind the screen, the associates like know is there but can't really like hear beyond. Like it's kind of like the only interaction you might have with the BPO agent is usually when they're just like escalating something. And that's just kind of, you see the name on the ticket and you move on. There's not really a like, I would say like a cross-pollination, but I wonder if teams that don't do that might be missing out on something really important.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it can go either way, right? Like we have some partners, I think, that have some of that screen, and then we have some partners that really want more integration because they care about that culture piece. And so like Grindr, for instance, is one of those companies that has like really deep integration.
Their VP of CX is killing the game. I can't remember her name right now.
Alice?
But yes, that's her. I follow her.
We love you, Alice.
Yes, we love you, Alice. I've never met you. And you don't know I exist, but I love your content. So if you're watching this, keep it up. But it's also really interesting to hear that like Grindr and Meetup, which are both companies where I would expect there's a really high degree of concern for things like trust and safety,
Yes.
and like these very sensitive issues. Like, it's really interesting to me to hear that they lean on a BPO, because a big argument I hear from folks day to day when I'm like, oh, that sounds like a problem that you can maybe solve through outsourcing, is like, oh, this thing that we touch is just too complicated to like ever let somebody else in. But I'm kind of curious, like, is that a pushback that you guys like receive on the ground very often?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that have concerns about like, oh, are they going to understand the issues that we're helping with? Are they going to be able to, like, are they going to be technical enough to respond? Are they going to, are they going to respond in the way that we want them to? And I think that's something that we work with partners with. Like, we have a ton of partners, like, for example, Butterfly Network, which does at-home ultrasounds. Like, they allow people to have at-home ultrasounds.
Very sensitive.
Super sensitive. They outsource with us, and they were really concerned about like, okay, well, how are these associates going to get the language right? And how are they going to be sensitive enough to talk to doctors who are like having problems with an ultrasound machine? And that's just something that you have to work on with them, right? Like, we work really hand in hand with the people that come in to understand what it is that they care about. And any good BPO will do that, I think, if you just need to take advantage of it.
I feel like there's another potential like quiet part we haven't fully said out loud yet, which is that it sounds like the implementation of your BPO experience really matters, and 100%. You get in what you put in.
Yes, like the community center.
Like it all goes full circle back to Stardew Valley. Like, do you want this fulfilling journey, or do you want megacorp?
Yeah, exactly. And so like, if you come in and you're like, it's important to us that we have culture, and it's important that we have this integration between team members, and people's experience is really important to us. Like, if you lead off with that, any good BPO should like build that into their hiring practices and work along with you to figure out how to have that connection without being enmeshed. Obviously, like, enmeshment is not good.
Light separation.
Yeah, you need to have a little bit of separation, but like, you can have that connection and at a really deep level if you're willing to put in the work ahead of time.
Right. Just that feeling that someone really does get your business, but you're going to have to take that time and investment up front to get them there.
Yes, 100%. You do have to invest some of your time and some of your energy in order to like get there.
But it will pay dividends, or at least that's what I'm hearing.
Yes. It will make for a much better experience for your internal team and for your external folks too.
Awesome. Well, I know we are right around that half-hour mark, and if I go much longer, my editor will probably put me on blast. So I'll go ahead and power us down here. But thank you so much, Mercer, for the amazing conversation today. And any last little things you would like our audience to know about you, Partner Hero, anything like that before we wrap up?
No, please find me on LinkedIn if you want to chat more about CX or BPOs or Stardew Valley. I'm on LinkedIn as Mercer Smith or Mercenator everywhere else on every other channel.
And, I've never explicitly said this on LinkedIn, but if anyone wants to slide into my DMs to talk about Stardew Valley or workforce management or CX, like, all of those things are on the menu. It's not just the back half. Yes. But anyway, well, have a wonderful day, folks, and thanks for tuning in.